What's up, guys? Steven here today. And today I had a really interesting idea or a concept that has been kind of like percolating across the surface of my membrane for quite a while. And it's essentially the concept of respecting the curve or the J curve if you want to get particular as far as baseline trend lines go, right? So, what do I mean by that? Well, essentially, it seems like if you followed all the videos that I made in the series up until now, everything kind of percolates down to, um, I guess you can say, recurring or common motifs, right? Rhythm, vibration, frequency, time, and timing, right? And then how done that well over and over, it has like sort of like an exponentiating factor. Think of like hitting the whammy bar in Guitar Hero. Every time you get like a set of notes correctly right? Now, my point in making um, or raising to awareness the idea of the curve is because if you think about it, nothing is ever so clearly or perfectly linear, right? Um, you take a step, like you take 3 steps forward. Like when you're walking right now, it looks like you might do to the best of your ability to walk straight. But in reality, what happens is you end up moving in like a curve, right? Like there, because the foot, the feet, your feet don't perfectly align behind each other because of so many offsets. Like your feet, um, your different uh, habitual ways of moving, right? Like I'm talking about like your biomechanic habits, right? I'm talking about even fucking the air itself, your, your where you are currently located, the region, how hot it is, the density of the air, the density of the different minerals and elements present, your body composition at that time, like what kind of body type you have. All these things play into effect into, I guess, this element that some people have coined as epsilon, right? So it's like kind of like um, uh, trying to put into play or trying to recognize the element of randomness, right? Now, what I'm saying is all of these are typically on some level missed or not missed, but underrepresented, undervalued, because they're so minute, they're so small in value compared to like comparing, for example, 1,000 to 0.0001, right? The difference is so stark that to put it on the same chart as the 1,000 value, you would see such a disparity that it's almost um, pointless to reflect or put in your chart. But the funny thing is, it must be done regardless. Again, that 0.001 makes whatever it is that you're representing what it is. Without that data point, without that value, you would literally be shooting or cutting apart your leg, right? Cutting apart the leg or the arm of the waveform of whatever it is you're trying to represent. Now, to go back to the step walking thing, um, what's interesting about that is that we forget all too often that we're on a planet or a giant rock that is moving extremely fast. Not only does it have a forward rotation, it also has, not only does it have like a vertical rotation, but it also has a horizontal rotation. And so that means that it's actually doing this, right? It's moving in this, um, I don't want to use the word circadian because it has too many connotations that I have not yet gotten to unpack yet, but it has this flow to it that causes it to move in a multi-directional way. It's not just one way or two way, or it's multi-directional, right? Hence the whole um, what do they call it? Chaos theory visual, right? Like that six-sided black thing, right? And so because of that, it has really cool properties, right? One of them, you can always move in sync, but then you can also move out of sync, right? And that difference in, I guess you can say, vibration causes really interesting, cool things to happen. One of them being able to have or produce manifestations that we refer to as curves, right? And there are multiple types of curves. The one that we're most um, we know the best is what I call the J curve. Essentially, it's a parabola, but you're only focusing on the upswing. Reason being, if you think about it, that's kind of how everything is, right? Kind of building on that moving at your own cadence video, if you realize that everything is a J curve, then you'll almost see how futile just spinning your wheels unnecessarily into things that literally are not of any significance when you realize how long life is, right? Or even feeling this ever pervading sense of rushing to get things done when taking your time is actually the best way to get it done. And even better, get it done at the fastest speed possible. Now, why I use the J curve? It's because I recently realized that if you think about it, life moves more like a 10-speed bike than fucking anything else, right? And it became even more clear to me when I started going to a lot of different, I guess, dance venues or venues where they play different kinds of music, right? So I've been listening to a lot of like Latin and cumbia. And one thing that I noticed for myself, I always did well at finding my own rhythm when I just focused on building my own bass, right? On building my own two-step to the music. If I try to jump in and essentially move at the same speed as everyone else did, even though I could, what would happen is I would just inevitably fizzle out 5 seconds later. Not because I wasn't able to keep up, not because maybe the speed or the movement, whatever it is, the energy level of the dance was higher, but simply because I did not make it my own, right? And it's kind of why I use the analogy of the 10-speed bike. Because when you realize that everything that you do has to come from the soul, then you almost see that I have to find the beauty within myself first for it to be worth a damn, right? So for me, how I guess like uh, word that is, I have to like go at my own pace, right? I have to start at speed 0, then speed 1, then speed 2, then speed 3. And before I know it, instead of going sequentially, there'll come this point where kind of like a tipping point, if you want to put it like that. It's like I'm just skipping speeds altogether. I go from like speed 3 to like 10, and it doesn't even seem as if there's like a shift in transmission box, if you will. Like it's just like I'm riding the wave that I produced. And the cool thing about that is it's extremely sustainable. Like I feel like I can go on and on and on and on and on simply because that wave was literally meant for me, right? And by that, every time it zigs and it zags, it's almost like I'm just one with it. So that means that there's never any real expenditure of energy. I'm literally just going with the momentum that was ushered forth from the beginning. And the cool thing about it then is it allows for such a greater range of expression because now I can like cut and chop and screw at times that I never even knew was possible had I just done the do that other people were, right? So it's kind of really nice in the way that I'm bringing it out because I was kind of struggling as to like how to illustrate it in a way that people could understand it without, I guess, feeling lost, right? Because to this, there's this point that I wanted to make, which is that you have to remember that everything is at an atomic level first, right? So if you want to get like nuts and bolts, it's all about the electrons dancing together, right? They're just constantly gyrating, right? Now, chemists and physicists focus on the field, right? So the region or the zone that you might find them dancing in. But in reality, nothing is set in stone. That means that essentially they're always constantly doing their own thing, right? That's pretty much why the advent of like alternate realities and all this other thing came about. Of even atoms phasing out, as if phasing out of existence and coming back in came about. Because we're realizing that essentially electrons are not these like hard stone or hard boiled in stone kind of things, but it's more of an ephemeral element, or I don't even know what the word would be. It's an ephemeral object, if you want to put it that way. So remember that, and then by that, it follows then that the dancing of electrons is what creates not only the geometry that we see, but also the way that the atoms interact with one another, right? And the reason why I bring this up is because then it makes sense that, oh well, also let's not forget that it's not so much that there are levels, but it's kind of like a heat map, right? You have like one ring and another ring and another ring and another ring, and they're all also dancing together. But what I wanted to make clear was that nothing ever said that they were dancing in the same direction, right? And there is where the multi-directionality that I mentioned before is made, right? Nothing says that one level is going this way and another is going that way, right? Nothing prevents two levels from actually being in sync and others to being countersync, right? And in that, there's such a beauty in it, because now think of how fucking awesome that is, what that does. I mean, that's where things like centripetal force come about. I started making my homemade fruit smoothies again, and like I was sitting here the other day just like letting the machine do its thing, and for one reason or the other, I started just staring at like how it was blending, and I noticed that like obviously the stuff that had been there before, it was on the bottom, right? And the new stuff that I put in was on the top. You could see the difference in, I guess if you want to call it solutions, right? Or the mixtures. So one mixture was from the stuff that had perfectly blended together, and the other was stuff that was still blending. And I noticed how like there was like a clear flow to it, right? So it felt like it was like spinning this way, and then what would happen is it would just keep stirring and stirring, stirring to where the bottom, where the knives are, right? Spinning, cutting stuff up. But then it would just come about in the out, and not even going through the center, but like outwards, back and to the top to link up again with that previous pathway that I just drew. And it would just do this over and over and over. And you know what I thought of? That's fucking Naruto's Rasengan. So one force is going this way, or one flow is going this way, another one is going that way. And this flow is maybe creating the outer sheath of it. And then this flow is creating the inner, like the core. And that's what makes it to where that's what's carrying like the punch, right? And then like the stuff outside kind of like sheaths it to where it can not only perforate but penetrate any wall. If you see any object that it encounters as a wall without ever it causing the reverb of the penetration to affect the tightly packed punch, which is the core. And I thought it was so fucking cool because there's an episode where he's like training and he's like trying to learn, and you can clearly see that. And I was like, ah, GG, there is a God, and he talks to us in so many ways. But yeah, it led me to essentially see that people have mentioned this thing called the Mobius Strip, right? Which is essentially this thing goes like that, right? And then at the end, it kind of cuts out. I was like, oh, look, there's the figure 8 hourglass that we're all so curious as to how it comes about, right? It's almost like it slips out of existence, but in reality, it's just joining another level. And I was like, ah! But it led me to realize that really, even at that level, I feel like they're also taking their time. The electrons themselves, they're not just going to like highest level possible, but they're slowly and slowly rising in energy, has their own rhythm, accords them to go at, right? And it's never forced, it's just flowing. And I was like, oh shit, so that's what a tornado is. Anyways, on to other things. Just remember that there are different types of curves. And obviously, if you ever get lost, always refer back to the J curve. Because at the end of the day, it's the one that encompasses all of them all, right? All the other curves are just raised powers of that. So it's kind of like a best fit trend line, if you will. Anyways, the final thing that I wanted to mention was there was a point where I was talking about the steps walking right behind one another, lining up one behind another. And what I was trying to say is that because the earth is moving really fast, even though we're near, I want to say the fact that we're not, some people believe that because we're moving at the exact same speed as the earth, that's why we're not just like flying out, kind of like those attraction parks, you know, the fucking, you're in a pad and it spins around and around and around, and you're kind of like glued with it, even though it's moving so fucking fast, right? I actually believe that it's not as exact, and because of that, the offset is it allows for what I call the azimuth, Azimuth, which means it's kind of like the skirt or the steez factor, if you will, where you're kind of just constantly just doing this whole thing, this dance, right? And it's almost like it's going with the fact that the earth is not setting, or it's not just at rest. It's just constantly spinning in multi-direction, And you being at a small offset of that frequency are actually able to like choose which direction you want to essentially bob and weave or flow in relation with, right? And it's this cool fucking dance, kind of like a swing, so to speak. So be aware of that because I think it affects people a lot more than they think, and it has a lot of applications in like numerous amounts of places. I mean, a simple soccer set is based on the azimuth because you're not just stopping the ball, you're not just turning, but remember the fact that the earth is not just at rest causes your core, which is the thing that's always like in line with your skeletal body. It'll cause it to kind of gyrate. And so you can almost do some really fucking cool things. And that's where like style and the ways football players or soccer players move in such a fucking sick way comes about. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Anyways, I don't know if all this made sense. I sincerely hope it did. Hope you guys got something out of it. And as always, swag the fuck out.